Day 12 of Diddy's federal trial didn't just unfold, it erupted into something no one in that courtroom will ever forget. What began as another day of testimony quickly transformed into a full-blown emotional earthquake. And at the center of it all stood Mia, a former assistant who carried the kind of secrets that could sink a legacy. Her words were raw, her voice cracked. Her presence alone demanded silence. By the time she finished, jaws were dropped, hearts were racing, and the entire courtroom seemed to shift under the weight of what had just been revealed. Mia's account wasn't speculation. It wasn't rumor. It was a first-hand retelling of what she says happened behind the closed doors of one of the most powerful figures in music history. She didn't speak like someone rehearsing a legal strategy. She spoke like a survivor ripping open wounds she never wanted to revisit. From emotional trauma to physical attacks, from manipulation to moments of sheer terror, Mia painted a picture of Sean Diddy Combs not as a mogul, but as a man who allegedly weaponized power against those closest to him. And she wasn't the only one. Throughout the day, other witnesses backed up chilling claims with disturbing consistency. But it was Mia's testimony that cracked the courtroom wide open. She described nights where she and Cassie Ventura were so afraid for their lives, they ran into the ocean rather than face what was inside that house. Paddleboarding into the dark waves wasn't an act of rebellion, it was an act of survival. That imagery, that desperation, haunted every word she spoke. The shock came not only from the details themselves, but from how long these stories had been buried. Mia claimed she stayed silent for years out of fear. Fear of losing her job. Fear of being blacklisted. Fear of Diddy himself. She admitted she truly believed, that going to the police wouldn't help, that Diddy's influence extended further than the law. And for years, she convinced herself it was safer to suffer in silence than speak out and lose everything. That silence shattered in court. As Mia testified about the alleged assaults, some taking place in hotel rooms, others in Diddy's own homes, the emotional weight in the room became unbearable. Spectators watched as she recounted waking up to find Diddy allegedly violating her. She described moments where she froze in fear, unable to move, afraid that one wrong reaction could cost her life. And still, she came forward. Not to punish, but to finally be heard. By the end of her testimony, the courtroom wasn't just listening, they were witnessing the unraveling of something much bigger. This wasn't just a lawsuit. This wasn't just a celebrity scandal. This was a systemic takedown of a culture built on silence, loyalty, and unchecked power. What Mia revealed echoed far beyond the courthouse walls. It struck a chord with every viewer watching, every survivor still silent, and every industry professional who had looked the other way. Mia's testimony also raised another painful question. How many more stories like hers have never been told? Her courage exposed what many suspected but few could confirm, that behind the glitz, the Grammys, and the global fame, there was something deeply broken. And now, for the first time, it was being dissected under oath. With each word she shared, the walls around Diddy's carefully curated image began to crumble. So when the judge finally dismissed the court that day, it wasn't just the end of a session, it was the beginning of something seismic. The myth of untouchable stardom was cracking. The machine that protected the rich and famous was faltering, and viewers across the world were left with one burning question. If this is what Day 12 revealed, what could possibly come next? Day 12 of the trial wasted no time diving into controversy. As the courtroom settled, Diddy's legal team fired their first shot of the day, demanding full access to confidential documents from Cassie Ventura's $10 million settlement with the Intercontinental Hotel. This wasn't just legal housekeeping. It was a high-stakes move that sent the courtroom buzzing. The intent was clear, to paint Cassie not as a victim, but as someone who might have something to hide. Someone who, in their eyes, could be financially motivated to fabricate claims. At the heart of this argument was the 2016 hotel incident, one of the most critical and disturbing parts of Cassie's case. The hotel settlement had been sealed, private, and settled outside the public eye. But Diddy's team insisted those documents could hold the key to unraveling her testimony. They suggested the payout might expose contradictions, or worse, show that Cassie had profited from the allegations. It was a calculated strategy. If they could poke holes in her credibility, maybe they could shift the jury's sympathy. But Cassie's attorneys came prepared, and they weren't pulling any punches. They immediately slammed the request as a thinly veiled attempt at character assassination. "This isn't about facts," one lawyer said. "This is about intimidation." They argued that dragging Cassie's private settlement into open court wasn't about justice. It was about leverage. A move to scare her, shame her, and create enough noise to drown out her truth. Then came the harshest accusation yet. Cassie's legal team accused Diddy's camp of weaponizing the court system. They described the subpoena as nothing short of harassment, suggesting it was part of a broader effort to silence her through legal exhaustion. They pointed out that she had already testified in graphic, painful detail about her experiences. The defense had their chance to cross-examine her. "If you didn't get what you needed then," her team snapped, "you're not getting it now." The judge didn't immediately rule on the request, but the tension was palpable. Observers noted how aggressively Diddy's team was pushing to reopen the settlement while avoiding certain elements of Cassie's actual testimony. That raised an unsettling question. Were they more concerned with what was in those documents, or what else Cassie might reveal if pushed too far? Outside the courtroom, legal analysts quickly weighed in. Some argued that the settlement documents could be relevant, depending on how they were framed. But others cautioned that opening sealed agreements could have a chilling effect on future victims coming forward. "If this gets through," one expert warned, "every survivor who takes a settlement will have to fear being dragged back into court again." And that's exactly what Cassie's team seemed to be defending against. Their message was simple. Cassie had spoken. She'd exposed the abuse, the manipulation, and the power plays she says Diddy used to control her. Her words were backed by other witnesses. Her story had already shaken the courtroom. Revisiting a sealed settlement wasn't about truth. It was about discrediting a woman who dared to break her silence. For Diddy's side, this was a risky gamble. On one hand, casting doubt on Cassie's motives could influence jurors already overwhelmed by the emotional weight of her testimony. But on the other, this move could backfire spectacularly. By attacking Cassie so publicly, the defense risked painting Diddy as the aggressor, not just in her past, but in the very courtroom meant to judge him. Adding fuel to the fire, Cassie's lawyers reminded the court and the public that the hotel settlement was completely separate from this federal case. "This isn't about civil damages," they said. "This is about criminal accountability." The strategy was clear. Protect Cassie's narrative, protect her dignity, and prevent the courtroom from turning into a spectacle that favored celebrity over truth. But that didn't stop speculation from spreading online. Social media erupted with hashtags like #TalkStandWithCassie and Diddy trial as users debated whether the settlement should be made public. Some believed transparency was necessary. Others insisted it was yet another tactic to discredit a woman already under immense pressure. The courtroom wasn't just the battleground anymore, so was the internet. And underneath it all was a deeper, darker question. If Diddy's legal team is this desperate to unlock sealed files, what do they fear is coming next? What are they trying to bury or distract from? As Cassie's name was echoed again and again in court, it was clear she wasn't just a witness in this case. She was the thread that, if pulled, could unravel the entire narrative. The morning session ended with no clear decision, but one undeniable shift. The courtroom dynamic had changed. This wasn't just about what Cassie said, it was about how far powerful men would go to silence her. And in that silence, the world was starting to hear something louder than ever before, the sound of a legacy cracking wide open. As the courtroom recovered from the earlier legal standoff, the next witness to take the stand was Deontay Nash, a former employee of Diddy and a longtime confidant of Cassie Ventura. What followed was one of the most harrowing testimonies of the entire trial so far. Nash didn't hesitate. He didn't flinch. He described a moment so violent, so traumatic, that the entire courtroom reportedly went still. And his words weren't vague. They were brutally specific. Nash recounted an explosive confrontation between Diddy and Cassie that escalated far beyond shouting. According to his testimony, the altercation spiraled into physical violence, and Nash, along with another woman, Mia, known in court documents as Victim 4, tried to intervene. Together, they jumped on Diddy's back in a desperate attempt to pull him off Cassie. But Diddy's strength overpowered them both. What happened next left a permanent scar on everyone who witnessed it. Nash said Diddy violently threw them off and then turned his rage back on Cassie. He described seeing Diddy grab her and slam her head directly into the corner of a bed frame. The sound of impact was horrifying. Cassie began bleeding from her head. The force, Nash said, wasn't just a push. It was a calculated act of destruction. In that moment, it became clear to everyone present that this wasn't a heated argument. This was something much darker. What shook the courtroom even more was what Nash described next. Instead of helping Cassie, Diddy froze, then panicked, but not in the way most people would when someone is hurt. Nash said Diddy's immediate concern wasn't Cassie's safety, it was damage control. He wanted the mess cleaned up. He wanted everyone quiet. He wanted the optics managed. This wasn't just violence, it was manipulation in real time. In the aftermath, Nash said he could see the fear in Cassie's eyes. But even more disturbing was what Diddy allegedly said later. Nash testified that Diddy threatened to leak intimate footage of Cassie, videos that he claimed would ruin her reputation, hurt her family, and destroy her career. One threat stood out. Diddy allegedly said he would send the footage to Cassie's parents' workplaces in an effort to get them fired. The message was clear: stay quiet or suffer. It wasn't just physical abuse, it was psychological warfare. The testimony outlined a pattern of control where fear and humiliation were used as tools. Diddy, according to Nash, didn't just want obedience. He wanted ownership of Cassie's body, of her reputation, of her future. And in that moment, the courtroom saw a glimpse into the terrifying structure of power that prosecutors say had operated for years. Nash's voice reportedly cracked as he detailed how helpless he felt. He admitted that even though he tried to stop the assault, he was no match for Diddy's force. He also feared for his own safety, but despite that fear, he kept speaking. And the courtroom, including members of the jury, leaned in. Because his testimony wasn't just shocking, it confirmed what others had hinted at. It gave Cassie's story a witness, and it made the abuse real. In one chilling moment, Nash admitted he had never told the full story until now. He said that like many others in Diddy's inner circle, he had remained quiet, out of fear, loyalty, or simply survival. But watching Cassie testify gave him the strength to come forward. He said he owed it to her, and to himself. She couldn't stop it, neither could I, he said. But we can speak now. The courtroom also heard that Nash had been present during other disturbing incidents. He described moments where Cassie was isolated, emotionally broken, and constantly monitored. He claimed that Diddy kept tabs on her even when they weren't physically together, using staff, surveillance, and guilt to control her every move. It was a system, not a series of isolated incidents. A system built on dominance. Even as the defense tried to push back, implying that Nash might be exaggerating or misremembering, the emotional clarity of his testimony stood firm. He didn't waver. He didn't contradict. And when cross-examined about why he waited so long to speak, his response hit hard. Because people like him make you believe you'll never be safe. By the time Nash stepped down from the stand, the impact was undeniable. His account wasn't just another voice. It was a direct line into the chaos, fear, and violence that prosecutors argued Diddy orchestrated behind closed doors. And in giving that testimony, Nash didn't just support Cassie, he validated every woman who'd been afraid to speak, every bystander who wondered if they should have done more. This wasn't just a witness statement, it was a moment of reckoning. Nash's testimony ripped apart the narrative of misunderstanding or exaggeration. It revealed the calculated brutality hiding beneath the surface of celebrity. And it left the courtroom and the world asking one chilling question. If this is what happened with people watching, what happened when no one was around? As the court recovered from the emotional weight of Deontay Nash's testimony, attention shifted sharply to a question circulating everywhere, from courtroom benches to social media timelines. Why is this case being prosecuted under RICO? This isn't a mafia trial. It's a celebrity, a music mogul, a cultural icon. But as prosecutors revealed, the details of this case fit the definition of RICO far more than the public expected, and the implications are massive. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, commonly known as RICO, was originally designed to take down organized crime families. But in recent years, it's been used in high-profile cases where crime isn't just about individuals, it's about systems. And that's what prosecutors say Diddy's empire truly was: a system. Not just one man making bad choices, but an organized, calculated structure where others played roles, knowingly or not, to maintain his power, silence victims, and cover up misconduct. Prosecutors began by establishing the first requirement: the existence of an enterprise. This doesn't mean a criminal organization in the traditional sense. It means a structured group operating with a common purpose. In Diddy's case, the prosecution argues that his business ventures, inner circle of employees, and personal assistants formed a network. Not for music or fashion, but allegedly for control, coercion, and cover-ups. It wasn't just a team, it was a machine. The second pillar of RICO: the enterprise must affect interstate commerce. And here, prosecutors laid out how Diddy's alleged misconduct wasn't confined to one city or state. There were hotel incidents in New York, abuse in Los Angeles, violent encounters in Turks and Caicos, and parties with drugs and NDAs in Miami. They showed how flights, hotels, and business transactions across state lines played a role in sustaining the system of abuse. Then came the third element: a pattern of racketeering activity. This is where things turned even more serious. Prosecutors listed a wide range of crimes that allegedly took place over the span of 2 decades. This included sex trafficking, witness tampering, drug distribution, bribery, physical assault, and financial fraud. These weren't isolated incidents, they argued. These were recurring acts, carried out with coordination and intent. One of the most shocking elements of the RICO claim is that Diddy doesn't have to be the one who committed every act. That's the power of this statute. Prosecutors only need to prove that he was part of the criminal enterprise, that he knew what was happening, enabled it, or benefited from it. In other words, Diddy's name doesn't need to be on every act of violence, every plane ticket, or every NDA. But if he helped orchestrate the system that allowed it, that's enough. The courtroom listened closely as this was laid out. Because while the public had heard about abuse allegations and troubling behavior, the framing of a RICO enterprise made it clear that this wasn't just a morality trial. It was a legal case aimed at dismantling what prosecutors called a predatory structure, a multi-layered machine of control with Diddy at the top. Legal analysts weighed in immediately. One noted, RICO charges are incredibly difficult to beat once they're filed. They suggest a level of criminal operation that's coordinated and sustained over years. If prosecutors can prove this, it won't just bring Diddy down, it could trigger federal investigations into everyone in his inner circle. That includes executives, staffers, and even celebrities who may have knowingly enabled his actions. And that's where the public reaction began to shift. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Diddy and Cassie, it was about the entire culture surrounding him. The assistants who stayed quiet, the business partners who looked the other way, the friends who saw bruises but said nothing. RICO cases are designed to expose not just the abuser, but the system that kept them protected. One of the prosecution's goals, it became clear, was to show that Diddy didn't act alone. Witnesses like Mia and Nash testified that employees were ordered to clean hotel rooms, book secret appointments, silence victims, and destroy evidence. These weren't personal choices. They were directives from the top, they claimed. The more the government can link these acts to a coordinated enterprise, the stronger their RICO case becomes. The courtroom grew tense as the implications sank in. If prosecutors win this argument, Diddy's future isn't just about financial loss or public reputation, it's about federal prison time. RICO cases can carry long sentences and are notoriously difficult to plea out of. They often require full cooperation or end in conviction, and that's why so many eyes are locked on this case. Not just for justice, but to see if an empire built on silence can finally be held accountable. So as Day 12 drew to a close, it wasn't just Diddy's name on trial, It was the entire system that allowed him to operate unchecked for 2 decades. The RICO framework made one thing terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just abuse. It was enterprise-level exploitation. And if prosecutors can prove it, the fall of a music titan may be just the beginning. When Mia stepped into the courtroom, everything changed. She didn't come in with fanfare. She didn't wear the weight of a celebrity. But when she spoke, quietly, carefully, and deliberately, the room shifted. What she carried wasn't just trauma, it was truth. And for the first time, that truth was being said out loud, under oath, in front of the man she once called boss. This wasn't just another witness. Mia was the insider. She had seen it all. Identified only by her first name to protect her privacy and safety, Mia had worked for Diddy in roles that gave her direct access to his daily life. She started as a personal assistant and later became a film executive. To the outside world, it looked like a dream job, jet-setting, red carpets, luxury. But Mia quickly made it clear, behind the glamour was something far darker. She described her job as chaotic, toxic, and terrifying. Every day was unpredictable. Every moment was high stakes. From the beginning, Diddy's behavior wasn't just demanding, it was violent. Mia testified that his moods could flip in seconds. She recalled being screamed at, berated, and physically assaulted over minor issues, like forgetting an item or not responding fast enough. He threw objects, he shoved her. And in one chilling moment, she described him slamming her against a wall over something as trivial as a scheduling conflict. The highs were euphoric, the lows were dangerous. But the most disturbing part of her testimony came when she talked about the alleged sexual assaults. Mia recounted a night early in her employment, Diddy's birthday party at the Plaza Hotel. She was invited in to share a toast. He poured her vodka shots. She took them to be polite. But quickly, something felt off. Her vision blurred. Her body stopped cooperating. The next thing she remembered, she was waking up alone in a chair in the penthouse suite. Disoriented, confused, violated. That wasn't an isolated incident. Mia revealed that Diddy repeatedly crossed physical boundaries with her, sometimes through manipulation, other times through force. She said he used his power not just to intimidate, but to trap her. She couldn't say no. Not to a meeting, not to a request, not even to an assault. Because in Diddy's world, saying no wasn't an option, it was a risk. She described a working environment where sleep deprivation was routine. During her first 24 hours on the job, she said she didn't sleep at all. She ran from Diddy's house to the office to the studio and back again. "I thought it was a test," she told the court. "I thought if I could survive that, I'd be safe." But she never was. The lack of sleep, she explained, was part of the system. Wear you down, keep you off balance, make you easier to control. What made Mia's testimony especially powerful was her clarity. She didn't stumble through vague accusations. She named dates, she listed addresses, she recalled what she wore, who else was there, and what Diddy said. Her memory was sharp, and it stunned the courtroom into silence. There was no dramatic flair, just horrifying facts, laid out plainly from someone who had lived them. She also talked about the emotional manipulation she endured. Diddy, she said, would alternate between abusive outbursts and intimate confessions. One moment, he'd scream that she was useless. The next, he'd praise her as his second brain. This cycle of praise and punishment kept her constantly guessing and constantly tethered to him. It wasn't just psychological abuse, it was programming.
Mia told the court that even when she moved into executive roles, running revolt films alongside Diddy, she still wasn't free. She said she was expected to work around the clock, respond instantly to demands, and maintain his image at all costs. When she did well, he rewarded her with compliments or temporary peace. When she slipped even slightly, the rage returned. Once, she said, he threw a computer at her head on a music video set because the Wi-Fi wasn't working.
Despite the chaos, Mia stayed. And when asked why, she gave the most painful answer. "Because I thought I was lucky." That sentence echoed through the courtroom like a gut punch. She believed, like many victims do, that enduring the abuse was the price of success. That speaking out meant losing everything she had worked for. That staying silent would at least keep her safe. But she wasn't safe. Not in the studio, not at award shows, not even in her own room. She described living in Diddy's houses, where she wasn't allowed to lock her door. Security staff had private secured rooms. She didn't. Because, she said, Puff told her, "No one locks doors in my house, especially not you." That meant there was no boundary, no privacy, no protection. And as her testimony came to a close for the day, Mia made it clear. What she endured wasn't about chaos. It was about control. Every decision, every punishment, every fake reward was designed to keep her in line. And for years, it worked. But now, she was breaking that silence. Not just for herself, but for every woman who'd been told to keep quiet and smile. The courtroom held its breath as Mia began describing what would become one of the most haunting stories in the trial. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like they had been locked away for years, desperate to be released. This wasn't just another violent encounter, it was a full-blown escape attempt. A night where two women, terrified and cornered, made a split-second decision: risk their lives in open water or face what waited inside. Mia testified that the night started like many others, tense, unpredictable, dangerous. They were staying at a private residence in Turks and Caicos. But sometime during the night, Diddy's mood shifted. Cassie, clearly shaken, ran into Mia's room in a panic. Her voice, Mia said, was trembling. "He's going to unalive me," she whispered. And in that moment, the fear was so visceral, so immediate, that both women sprang into action without thinking. They barricaded the door with anything they could find, chairs, tables, even a suitcase. But they knew it wouldn't hold. Mia said Diddy was screaming and pounding on the door, trying to get in. They had no weapons, no help, no time. Their only escape was through the back, where a porch led to the beach. They didn't hesitate. They ran. What came next could have been a movie scene, if it weren't so real. Mia described how they stumbled barefoot through the sand, swatting away mosquitoes and trying to stay hidden in the shadows. Puff's voice echoed behind them, still yelling, still coming. They made it to the edge of the water and spotted two paddle boards left by the dock. With no other option, they grabbed them and pushed off into the ocean. The water was cold, the air was thick, and the weather, Mia said, had started to turn. But none of it scared them as much as the man they were paddling away from. She remembered looking back and seeing Diddy pacing the beach, yelling, furious, out of control. "I was more afraid of him than I was of drowning," she said. Those words chilled the courtroom. They paddled until they couldn't see the shore. For a moment, they thought they might be safe. But the wind picked up. The waves grew stronger. The paddleboards wobbled beneath them. And then came the terrifying realization: they had no plan, no phones, no lights, no idea what was in the water around them. Nature had become the second threat. And still, they didn't turn back. Mia described the internal panic. Every splash sounded like something deadly. Every gust of wind made them question if they'd made the right choice. But neither of them said it. They just kept paddling, side by side. Two women who had reached their breaking point, drifting further from land, hoping that the open sea would be kinder than the home they had left. Eventually, exhaustion and fear forced them to return. The sky was darker, the tide was stronger, but they turned their boards around and silently approached the shore. Puff was no longer screaming, but that didn't make the situation any safer. Mia said every step back toward the house felt like walking into a trap. She expected punishment. She expected retaliation. But at that point, there was nothing left to lose. The moment they stepped back into that house, Mia said, she stopped being the same person. Something inside her had shifted. Survival had become second nature. Trust, she said, was gone. And even though she continued working for Diddy after that, her body and mind were in a constant state of defense. "I was always waiting for the next explosion," she told the court, "because I knew it was coming." What struck the courtroom wasn't just the story itself. It was the weight Mia still carried from that night, the way her voice shook, the way her body tensed as she recounted it. It wasn't a memory. It was a trauma. One that hadn't dulled with time, but had settled into her like a scar. And for the first time, it was being exposed under the brightest light imaginable. Observers noted the jury's reaction. Some leaned in closer, others looked visibly disturbed, but all of them were listening, hanging on every word. Because this wasn't gossip. It wasn't speculation. It was a first-hand account of two women so terrified of one man that they fled into the ocean with no plan, no safety net, and no certainty they'd survive. And that, Mia said, was what people needed to understand. This wasn't about drama. It was about desperation. The kind of fear that makes you do the unthinkable. The kind of trauma that lingers in your bones. That night in Turks and Caicos wasn't an isolated incident. It was a turning point. Proof that Diddy's control had reached a level where the women closest to him would rather risk their lives than spend another minute in his presence. When Mia began describing what insiders called the hotel nights, the courtroom grew tense. These weren't glamorous after-parties or luxury getaways. According to her testimony, these were dark, chaotic, and deeply disturbing nights, hidden from the public eye but seared into the memories of those who lived them. The hotels, she said, were where some of the worst things happened. And they weren't random. They were planned. Mia described a pattern so specific it sounded like a script. She would receive instructions, book the room, arrive early, set the scene, bring candles, towels, drinks, and in some cases, thousands of dollars in cash. But when the night ended, her role shifted. She became the cleaner, not housekeeping, but damage control. Her job, according to her, was to erase the evidence before anyone else walked in. She painted a graphic picture of the aftermath. She spoke of rooms littered with broken glass, overturned furniture, and candle wax smeared on walls and floors. In one instance, she recalled blood on the sheets, something Diddy allegedly brushed off as period blood when questioned. But to Mia, the scenes weren't just disturbing, they were terrifying. Because she had no idea what had really gone on behind closed doors, the pressure to cover it up came from the top. Mia testified that Diddy made it clear, no one, especially not hotel staff, could see the mess. He feared photos leaking to TMZ or tabloids, so Mia would scrub the rooms, sometimes alone, sometimes with other assistants, until they looked untouched. We couldn't let anyone know what really happened there, she said. Not ever. But the physical mess wasn't the only concern. Mia also revealed that drugs played a central role in these nights. She said Diddy routinely offered and sometimes pressured those around him to take MDMA, ketamine, and other substances. For Mia, it wasn't optional. She recounted one party where Diddy laid out 3 trays, one with Molly, one with ketamine, one with cocaine, and insisted everyone participate in a twisted party game. When Mia hesitated, he noticed, and he got angry. She tried to fake it, pretending to snort a smaller amount. But Diddy allegedly saw through it. He separated the dose, handed it to her directly, and watched her take it. She said she remembered the burn, the dizziness, and the shame, not just because of the drugs, but because she felt like she had no choice. I didn't think I could say no, she told the court, not without consequences. The drugs, she said, weren't just about partying. They were about control. They blurred lines, lowered inhibitions, and erased memories. Mia testified that after these nights, people would leave the hotel rooms disoriented, confused, and sometimes barely able to walk. She believed that was the point. It was easier to manipulate people when they didn't know what had happened, she said, or couldn't prove it later. She also explained how Diddy maintained an image of control, even in these moments of chaos. He would rotate staff, switch hotels, and use company credit cards to cover charges. Nothing was ever in his name. Everything had a buffer. Mia described feeling like a pawn, moved around to protect a king. Her job wasn't just to assist, it was to insulate. The more she testified, the clearer it became. These hotel nights were not spontaneous. They were orchestrated, rehearsed. The same way a movie shoot has a call sheet, these nights had a checklist, and Mia was expected to run it. From lighting candles to delivering drugs, from silencing witnesses to cleaning blood, she was part of a machine that prioritized secrecy over safety. And if she ever questioned it, there were consequences. Mia said she was once suspended without pay after being spotted at a party Diddy told her not to attend. Another time, she said he screamed at her for hours over a missing bag. She described the emotional whiplash of going from his favorite to his target in a matter of minutes. "I never knew who I was going to face," she said. "The charming mogul, or the monster." Even when she wasn't directly involved in the violence, Mia said the psychological toll was crushing. She lived in constant fear of being blamed, of being discarded, of being next. She recalled bringing items to hotel rooms and being met with eerie silence or a bloodied face, but she never asked questions. "You're not supposed to," she said. "You just fix it and pretend you didn't see anything." By the end of this portion of her testimony, the courtroom looked stunned. Mia hadn't just shared a glimpse into the chaos, she'd exposed a system. One built on wealth, fear, drugs, and power. The hotel rooms weren't just scenes of misconduct, they were crime scenes, scrubbed clean, sealed with NDAs, and hidden behind luxury branding. And now, finally, the world was seeing what happened when the doors closed and the curtains were pulled tight. The temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop as Mia's voice trembled. What she was about to say wasn't just difficult, it was devastating. There was no build-up, no dramatic pause. She simply said it. She had been sexually assaulted, multiple times, by the man she worked for, the man the world knew as Puff Daddy. But behind the platinum records and luxury empire, she claimed, was a predator who used silence and fear as his greatest weapons. Mia explained that the first incident happened at the Plaza Hotel during Diddy's birthday celebration. She said he gave her vodka, something she usually handled well. But that night was different. Her body went limp. Her vision blurred. She blacked out. When she came to, she was sitting in a chair in the suite, disoriented and alone. She didn't remember how she got there. She didn't remember what happened in between. And she never asked. Because deep down, she already knew. But it didn't stop there. The next time, she said, Diddy came into her room unannounced. She had been asleep in a bottom bunk because locking her door wasn't allowed. She woke up to a heavy weight on her body. She couldn't move. He was on top of her. Fast, aggressive, silent. She described feeling frozen, not from cold, but from shock. "I didn't scream," she said. "I didn't even blink. I just shut down." It was over quickly, but the damage was permanent. Mia said that afterward, Diddy acted like nothing had happened. He gave her a task, sent her a message, made a joke. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just business as usual. And she played along, not because she wanted to, but because she didn't feel safe doing anything else. Another assault happened in a closet at one of Diddy's homes. Mia was organizing his things, doing her job, when he cornered her. She said he exposed himself, grabbed her head, and forced her into a sex act. Her eyes welled with tears on the stand as she described what happened next. "I didn't do anything," she said. "I didn't fight. I just let it happen, because if I resisted, I thought he'd hurt me worse, or ruin me, or both, or..." And then came the jet, a private flight with his team. Everyone else was asleep. She walked past him to use the bathroom, and he pulled her into a bed near the rear of the plane. "It was always when no one was looking," she said. "He knew exactly how to stay hidden, how to make sure I wouldn't be believed if I ever spoke up." Mia's voice cracked, but her words stayed strong. She said she never wanted these interactions, never gave consent, but never said no either, because she didn't feel like she could. "I couldn't even say no to a sandwich," she said. "So how was I supposed to say no to that?" It was a gut punch line that left the courtroom stunned. The power imbalance wasn't just implied, it was enforced. Mia explained that Diddy's control went beyond the physical. He controlled her career, her income, her housing, even her phone. She said he threatened to blacklist her, to ruin her name, to leak compromising photos if she ever stepped out of line. One time, he told her he had already downloaded everything from her phone. It was a lie, she later realized, but one that kept her silent. Because if he could do that, what couldn't he do? She admitted she never went to police, never told HR, never filed a complaint. Because, she said, she didn't believe anyone would protect her. This was before Me Too, before social media, before people listened to women like me, she said. Back then, you didn't speak up, you just survived. And that survival came at a cost. Mia said she suffered anxiety, depression, and physical illness from the stress. But she pushed through because she thought she had no choice. She believed her career, her safety, and her identity were tied to this man. So she smiled at events, posted curated photos, and kept working through the pain. But the worst part? She believed it was her fault. I thought maybe I brought this on myself, she said. That I wasn't strong enough. That I didn't say no loud enough. It took years for her to understand that what happened to her wasn't weakness. It was survival in the face of calculated abuse. As her testimony ended for the day, the courtroom sat in heavy silence. Mia hadn't just accused Diddy of assault. She had laid bare a pattern of fear, manipulation, and trauma that stretched across years and continents. And for the first time, she said it out loud, with no script, no filter, no protection, just truth. And once spoken, it couldn't be taken back. Mia's testimony took a chilling turn as she explained how Diddy didn't just abuse her, he erased her. Her independence, her sense of safety, her very identity were slowly stripped away until she felt like she no longer existed outside of his orbit. This wasn't just physical control, it was psychological warfare. Every detail she shared painted the picture of a man who didn't just want obedience. He wanted total domination over every aspect of her life. She told the courtroom that Diddy controlled her phone activity. He read her messages, deleted conversations, and even took her devices away entirely when he wanted to monitor her. One time, he allegedly told her he had downloaded compromising images from her phone and stored them on his own device, just in case. He later admitted it was a lie, but the damage was done. The mere threat of having her privacy weaponized was enough to keep her silent. There was no corner of her life untouched. Mia said she wasn't allowed to lock her doors. Even in her own room, she was vulnerable. Security staff had rooms with keypads and deadbolts, but she, the woman closest to him, had none. If she left the house without permission, Diddy would send people to find her. She described one instance where she snuck out at 2 a.m., only to be tracked and called by security within minutes. It wasn't just paranoia, she said. It was surveillance. The physical violence was terrifying, but the unpredictability was worse. Mia testified that Diddy would throw whatever he could grab when enraged: food, phones, computers. One time, he allegedly hurled a laptop at her because the Wi-Fi didn't work. Another time, it was a bowl of spaghetti because she asked for a moment to change her tampon before completing a task. There was no warning, no rationale, just instant rage. And then, just as suddenly, he would switch. Mia explained the pattern: rage followed by remorse. After the outbursts, Diddy would often try to pull her back in with compliments, promotions, and even emotional pep talks. He would tell her how valuable she was, how much he needed her, how no one else could do what she did. These weren't apologies. They were control tactics, ways to keep her tethered emotionally while continuing the cycle of abuse. What made this manipulation so dangerous, Mia said, was how effective it was. She began to doubt her own reality. One minute she was terrified. The next, she was praised. She didn't know which version of Diddy was real, so she treated both as truth. I was in survival mode, she told the court. One minute I'm dodging a flying object, the next I'm being told I'm irreplaceable. It messes with your head. She also revealed how isolated she became. Her friends disappeared. Her family grew distant. She lived in Diddy's homes, followed his schedule, and had to ask permission to go anywhere. Even as she climbed the ranks professionally, helping launch revolt films, attending red carpets, she was trapped. It looked like freedom, she said, but it was a cage with a velvet lining. By the end of this section, one thing was heartbreakingly clear. Mia wasn't just a victim of abuse. She was the product of long-term psychological conditioning. Diddy didn't just want loyalty. He demanded erasure. And Mia, like many in his circle, had been forced to disappear into the background of his carefully curated image. Only now, through this trial, was she finally stepping back into her own story. As Mia's testimony came to a close, the courtroom wasn't just quiet, it was still. You could feel the weight of her words hanging in the air. Her voice cracked as she confessed something deeply personal. She never intended to speak. She had every intention of carrying this pain, this truth, to her grave. Because for years, silence felt safer than honesty, and survival meant pretending none of it ever happened. She said the shame alone was paralyzing, not because she had done something wrong, but because Diddy had made her feel like she had. Like she was weak, like she let it happen. "I thought it was my fault," she told the court. That belief didn't just keep her quiet, it kept her trapped. It took years to realize that what she endured wasn't her failure. It was his abuse, systematic, deliberate, and calculated. Mia explained that her silence wasn't just personal, it was cultural. "Back then, no one would have believed me," she said, "not against someone like him." The power imbalance was so vast, the fear so ingrained, that even considering speaking out felt impossible. There were no hashtags, no movements, no safe spaces to land, just a powerful man and the empire that protected him. But watching Cassie come forward changed everything. Mia said it cracked something inside her, that for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. Cassie's bravery lit the match, and Mia's truth was the fire. She stood up. "So I had to stand too," she said, holding back tears. "Not just for her. For me, for every girl who thought she was crazy, or dramatic, or lying." She made it clear, this was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming her life. Mia admitted that testifying publicly under oath was the hardest thing she's ever done. She called it humiliating, gut-wrenching, but necessary. Because keeping secrets, she said, doesn't protect you. It protects them. "I was supposed to die with this," she whispered, "but I'm not going to let it bury me anymore." Observers in the room noted how visibly shaken she was, but also how resolved. This wasn't just a survivor telling her story. It was a woman exposing the machinery of silence, built by fear and fueled by power. Mia wasn't just naming names. She was dismantling a legacy, one truth at a time. Her courage reminded everyone watching that speaking out isn't weakness, it's survival in motion. By the end, her tears weren't just for what happened. They were for the years lost to fear, the moments stolen by manipulation, the version of herself she had to kill off just to stay alive in Diddy's world. But now, she stood fully in her truth. Raw, vulnerable, powerful. Her voice didn't just echo through the courtroom. It reached far beyond, into households, headlines, and hearts. And that's what made this moment so important. Mia didn't just testify against a man. She testified against a system. A culture that protects power, silences victims, and erases the truth. But not this time. Not anymore. Her story is no longer a secret. It's a warning, a reckoning, and a demand for accountability that can no longer be ignored. Day 12 didn't just shake the courtroom. It sent shockwaves through the entire entertainment industry. What unfolded wasn't just a string of disturbing stories. It was a dismantling of the illusion that power protects the innocent. Testimony after testimony didn't simply describe abuse. They exposed a system built to enable it. A system that relied on fear, silence, and status to keep the truth buried. But now, that system is cracking under the weight of its own secrets. Diddy's empire was once seen as untouchable, a global icon, a kingmaker, a business mogul whose reach extended from music to fashion to television. But behind that curated image, prosecutors allege, was a decades-long pattern of coercion, violence, and cover-ups. The stories shared by Mia, Deontay, Nash, and others weren't isolated. They were pieces of a larger machine. A machine that, according to the government, operated like a criminal enterprise designed to protect the man at the top. This isn't just about one man's actions. It's about the culture that let him operate unchecked for over 20 years. The silence from insiders, the complicity of enablers, the systemic failure to protect victims until it was too late. But now, with each day of testimony, that silence is being shattered. The courtroom isn't just listening, it's pulling back the curtain on how fame has been used as armor. And this time, that armor is no longer working. If these allegations are proven true, this case will go down in history not just as a celebrity trial, but as a defining moment in accountability for powerful men in entertainment. The RICO charges, the emotional testimonies, the overwhelming patterns of abuse, all suggest this isn't just a legal battle. It's a cultural reckoning, one where influence no longer guarantees impunity, and where victims are finally being heard, believed, and protected. So, is this the end of the empire? It's too soon to say. But one thing is certain. Whatever Diddy built on silence and fear is now under a microscope. And with every new witness, every cross-examination, and every piece of evidence, that foundation grows weaker. The world is watching. And for the first time, the truth isn't being managed. It's being revealed. Stay tuned. Because the storm, it's only just begun.